Hello, this is Mesh, and welcome to another WestWorld Theories video. This one is centric around the question, is Bernard Arnold? So before I get started, this is going to contain spoilers, so if you're not up to date with the current episode, currently I've seen up to episode 7, so if you haven't seen that one, you might want to skip this video or maybe watch it then come back. So what I'll do is I'll do a pros for Bernard being Arnold and then a cons as the reasons why I think not. And then we'll just mix it up at the end with some crazy theories about other people that could be Arnold. So as we know, Bernard is confirmed a host. In the last episode, we see that confirmation. So that I can see from many comments and many other theories on the websites and on YouTube that people now immediately are saying that because Bernard is a host, he was definitely Arnold previously. Before, obviously, he's a host now. Previously, Bernard as a human was Arnold. Now, let's start with the pros. So reasons why I think that this is definitely a good theory and things that definitely confirm that theory. So let's start with the picture we saw in episode 3. So we see Ford give Bernard a picture and say this is Arnold. And we see a picture with Ford, a younger version of Ford, and a man in the middle of the picture, and a space on the right. Now, initially everyone thought the man in the middle was Arnold, or quite a few people thought that there's a weird space to the right, which I'll agree that was a weird thing. Now, we know that Bernard is a host, and we know that he can only see things that don't hurt him. And by that I mean things that are going to affect his code and his ability to work. So another reference will be the door hidden in that house in episode 7. So he couldn't see the door because he was never meant to go down there because he would figure out that he was a host. And the same thing when he saw the diagram to his own, I guess, schematic, and he couldn't see that. So that one suggestion is that picture is that he is standing to the right of the man in the middle. That's why it's a blank space, and I guess it's quite cheeky of Ford to give that picture to him, but he knew he wouldn't see it. But in a way, it kind of gratifies Ford. So that definitely is for me, that's a definite stamp that one of the confirming points that Bernard is Arnold. So he would be the man on the right of that picture. Okay, the next point is the reference we've heard many times as to why, I guess, Arnold died, what his motives were, that he had a tragic history, a tragic life. And we see a parallel with Bernard in that situation. So we know Bernard lost his son, and he was grieving. We've seen many flashbacks to the grieving process and him in the hospital with his son. So once again, a parallel between Arnold, we don't know exactly what his tragic history was, but we see Bernard having a tragic history. So once again, another confirming point there. Now the next one is conversations that Bernard has had with Dolores. Now, the tricky thing is with this, we might be seeing Bernard talking to Dolores in historic moments. So we might see Bernard, who we think is Bernard talking to Dolores, may have been Arnold. So if you remember, there's many timelines going on with the show. So we could be seeing Arnold talking to Dolores the very first few years the park was open. And that is a reference there where he's kind of saying, he thinks it's a mistake what he has done, but he's letting her continue on. So that could be another one there, which is that for me is a really tricky one because you can never really confirm that around the timeline. So it just adds another layer of complexity to that part. But it is a very strong point though. So what adds to that point? Something which I've only just picked up when actually editing the images for this video. So on doing that, I'm kind of gone back in time and I've spliced this comment in here. So this picture here is Bernard, what we believe is Bernard talking to Dolores, saying, I think I've made a mistake with you. And then he kind of turns around and says, no, go ahead, find the maze. Now, the thing is, if you look at the background and then look at this picture, So these are the same location. And we're seeing that, the host, Bernard, has no recollection of this. Unless he's been wiped, but it's just another point to add in here. That this looks like it could be Arnold in the original, years of the park with Dolores under that little kind of cottage, which makes sense. It all kind of really adds up in that point, in that scene there, when you look at it. And then the future scene, go back to the other picture again, and we see that is the same location. So just once again, just another really strong point around this, a pro that Bernard is actually Arnold. And a next one. Then moving on to the next one. So we've seen a lot of Bernard's backstory. So we've seen him talking to his wife. We've seen him, have dreams. We've seen him have, a very vivid dream where he was reading stories to his son. So we've seen his son. Now, my point is around this is that we don't really see that level of detail in people's, in hosts' flashbacks. We've seen a few, but not to that level of detail. So that's another point here that if we might be getting flashbacks to when Bernard was Arnold and his memories. So that's once again another thing around timeline, so it's quite hard to confirm it, but it's just another point here that kind of stacks on the Bernard is Arnold theory. Another one is that we see a picture in Bernard's quarters of him and his son. Now, whilst that's not a massive one, it's just another little point on the kind of pro Bernard is Arnold side of things, because to do that, maybe it was computer generated, but it also could be that they've made a host for that situation, so there's a memory, and then they've taken a picture. So it seems quite elaborate to do all that, just to add a picture into Bernard's quarters. So once again, it's kind of inkling of that was actually a flashback when it was Arnold, and the picture is when it was Arnold and his son, as opposed to Bernard and his son. And the last point, there's a few more that I've skipped over, but I think these are the main ones, is the whole anagram that Bernard Lowe actually spells out Arnold Weber. So, yeah, that's the pro side of things. So now let's move on to the cons. So let's start with, probably my thought around this, around pro or con. Is it too predictable for the show, for Bernard to now be Arnold? The show has so many misdirections that I kind of get the feeling that it may be just too predictable. So many people now would believe that Arnold, Bernard was Arnold previously. So that's one thing that I kind of think that's just, my opinion, but that's just one thing. Okay, on to another one here. So when we see that, on the time we get confirmation that Bernard is a host, so we see Teresa kind of turn around to Ford and say, "Is this what you did to Arnold?" Now, Ford says something to Teresa. Admittedly, he could be playing games. He could be testing Bernard at that point. But it seems like a strange point to lie. You wouldn't lie to someone you're about to kill in that situation. It's the whole, villain spilling out all the information, James Bond villain spilling out the plan to destroy the world just before James Bond escapes. But so he turns around and says, no, she says, did Bernard kill Arnold? And he turns around and says, no, he wasn't there in those days. Were you, Bernard? And obviously Bernard doesn't know how to respond. So on one side, I know people have said in a few comments that was a test to Bernard to see what he was going to respond with. But on the other hand, once again, I kind of think, why would you say something like that? If the only person in the room, the only other human in the room, you're just about to kill. It doesn't kind of make sense. But once again, could be misdirection. Okay, so now let's move on to the, more crazy side of stuff, the cons that I think. So we know that Bernard is a host. So are we saying that Arnold, how did they replicate Arnold so perfectly to Bernard? We're still not sure of the technology around that. So that's just, it's not so much a con as more of a question of, are we saying that they have it's almost like they could take a picture of somebody and do a perfect match. Possibly, I mean, the technology might be there in this WestWorld technology system, but for me, that's just another kind of point of how perfect is it going to be if we're seeing Arnold in the previous time when talking to Dolores, and we're seeing Bernard now. It looks exactly the same. Are we meant to, once again, suspend disbelief and think that it's an exact duplicate Arnold in his human form as Bernard in his host form? Just a little thing there around that. Okay, onto this, I guess the same kind of point. Are we also saying that Arnold's consciousness has been moved to Bernard? Do they have that technology? Once again, it's kind of questioning information we don't know. But we see that the tragic story around Bernard's son, is that the same story that Arnold would have had? Or is that, are we just looking at Bernard as a host replica of what Arnold looked like, and Ford has filled him up with information, backstory, not real backstory, but just a tragic story, just so he's a similar person to what he is used to. So that, I guess, another thing that it would be good to get clarification if they're going to say that Bernard is Arnold as to how that all works. Because if they say, yes, Bernard is Arnold, then I would like to see them replicate another human into a perfect form of a host. And transferring consciousness, transferring memories. We don't know if that technology is available to Ford. So it's hard to make that stretch. But then we could be saying here that, once again, that Bernard could have been made in Arnold's memory, his image, and it's just a reference for Ford. Okay, so pros and cons. I think it's probably heavier on the pro side. There's a lot more things that do suggest that. But with this show, once again, it seems that when they're suggesting something, it's sleight of hand, and something else is happening, and boom, we're completely wrong about something. But that's the joy of the show, right? Okay, so that kind of summarizes that. So let's move on to a bit more out there theories around who is Arnold, and the kind of logic to Bernard and Arnold. So let's play a little bit of devil's advocate here. As I'm pretty sure at this point, Bernard is probably going to turn out to be Arnold. But once again, something in my mind is saying it's too easy. One thing that I've thought of, that we have been addressing Ford, so Anthony Hopkins, we've addressed him as Ford. Everyone addresses him as Ford. No one addresses him as Robert Ford, because that's his name, is Robert Ford. So could we be doing the same thing for Arnold? Could Arnold be a surname as opposed to a first name, as in a misdirection? So I don't know why there's this calling people by their surname, calling Ford by his surname as opposed to his first name. So in saying that, could Arnold be a female? Because if it's someone Arnold is the surname, then it could be a female in that position as opposed to a male. Just a thing to think about. Now, before everyone jumps on and says, we often hear the reference to Ford's male partner, Arnold, Ford references he many times, he, his, so Ford has suggested he's a male. But the thing is, the conversations that we saw that in, the main one, once again, that, I guess the component there, Bernard couldn't see who was in the picture. Could he also be blocking out that it was a she? That, is there a block out of voice as well? If someone says something to them, do they block that out? So would they replace she with he? Another possibility. I know it's pretty far-fetched, but it's just another point around. It's a bit strange that we'd call one of the partners by their surname and the other one by their first name. But anyway, so if we're going down the road here of Bernard is not Arnold, why would the picture that Ford gave to Bernard, so we're saying that Ford is on the left, in the middle is Ford's father, then the person on the right is missing. So obviously a big point there is that it's himself, so the game would have been up. He would know that he was Arnold originally. But if it's not him, who else could it be that he would need to be shielded from. Because just remember that the hosts can't see stuff which damages themselves, as in, he couldn't see the door to see where Ford was building things. He can't see the pictures of himself as a host. So if it's not Bernard in that picture, who could it be which makes sense for it still to be shielded from his view? So it has to be someone that we already know, or that Bernard knows. Could we be talking about a staff member? Or maybe even would Ford be, sick enough to, so if he has dispatched Arnold, recreate Arnold and put him in the park as a host? That's a possibility. Maybe the character that we see as Wyatt could be Arnold. So, there's many options here, but it does make sense that Bernard is Arnold. But once again, for me, it's almost too simple. It's almost too predictable for the show to do something like that. Now we've got the idea that Bernard is the host, confirmation, and then you look back at all these episodes, all the stuff really points to him being Arnold. But once again, it's just too predictable. And whilst it makes sense, there's a lot of evidence, I'm still on the fence as to, it's just that inkling that they're going to mix it up. That we're going to all be ready to see Bernard as Arnold, and then boom, it's going to be someone we didn't expect. Like Bernard's wife or something. I don't know. Who knows? It could be, once again, the Wyatt character. But either way, it's fantastic. I can't wait to find out. But will we find out in this season? That's another question. So I'll leave this video here. I think I've covered this topic pretty well. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Are you in agreement Bernard is Arnold? Do you have any other theories? Do you kind of agree with me that it might be a bit too predictable from what we've seen in the show already? Do you have any suggestions of who else could be Arnold? So leave me some feedback below. Thumbs up if you liked the video, thumbs down if you didn't, obviously. So please subscribe for future content from myself. And until next time, this is Mish, and I'll see you later.